question is has to do with engagement. That was what the first slide that we saw, and most of us are IITians here. We were all pretty damned engaged when we were in high school. We all wrote the JE. That was our focus. Fine. I'm speaking for myself. But I know. I mean, all of you know that you were pretty damned engaged when you were in high school. And you want to get into IIT. If you didn't get into IIT, you want to get into BIT Ranchi or some other place. It doesn't matter. BITS Pilani, wherever. So I think that still holds for many students who do want to study. The question is, more from an education perspective, why are students no longer engaged? What is it that is taking them away from education or whatever, and where have we lost our way, so to speak?
I think I would question that students were ever engaged. I think folks like you or us were engaged, but you have to remember we were, what, 1,000 or so people who were selected out of the 5 lakhs who applied to JE. The other 4 lakh, whatever, 4.99 lakhs, I think they wanted to do what, the minimum they could do to go get a degree so they could go get a job somewhere. And if you look at what's happening in India in particular, which really concerns me, is that India produces a very large number of engineers every year. I forget what the number is. We're doing about 1 lakh a year, I think, or more. And everything I read tells me that, says that more than half of those engineers are not employable. They have not. So other than IIT, IIT is a very, very small fraction. I mean, we're really the cream of the cream of the cream of the crop. We got in one way or the other into this thing, and there was a culture, and there was a ragda, and there was a brand, all of that. But I don't know that people, if you look at the 100,000 engineers, I gave a talk at Infosys a couple of years back, and we talked about the Infosys University, the whole training camps are set up, which are beautiful. And the reason they need those is because they hire all these people and they have to essentially give them another degree because they haven't learned a thing. So I don't know if the masses are engaged. I think, even here, if you go to Georgia Tech, you go to Emory, you go to MIT, people are engaged. But that's a very, very small sliver of things. So I think that's one thing that's changed. The other thing that's changed is I think the generation is different. In the US in particular, there are plenty of living legends around, with folks like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs in our field, who were dropouts who did pretty well, and then you have all the sportsmen and so forth. So the kids don't really see the value of education intrinsically. A lot of times the parents are not that engaged in education. They're either too busy or they have broken households and so forth. And again, our demographic here is very different from the general public. I think so. The norms are different. I think the kids have a lot more distractions. There's also an expectation amongst our youth that they need to be entertained a lot more. They need things to engage them rather than them taking the effort in engaging. It's just what's been happening. One of the things that Obama talks about in the rest of his speech about this is, why do we need education to be more like a game? I mean, don't the kids understand they need to learn this stuff, even if it's not fun? And they don't. And no one's there to tell them that. I think a lot of it is just culture's changing. But I would question that people back in our time were engaged. Again, I think we're looking at a very, very select and unusual segment of the population here that maybe was engaged.
But certainly expectations and benchmark compared to television and other entertainment.
And the expectation benchmarks are all very, very different. I mean, there's more competition. And,
It's pretty clear that most of these traditional higher education universities like MIT, Yale have embraced this concept, but at the high school level, still the more formal education system that we have. So how was the response from the high school system to this kind of concept of learning?
Yeah, so there are two types of responses from high schools. A large fraction of them are very skeptical. They're closing their doors even tighter than ever and refusing to acknowledge that things are changing. But there are some school systems, and even public school systems, that are starting to embrace this idea. And they're embracing it in a number of different ways. Arizona, for example, realized that, for them it was a financial decision initially. They could actually increase their revenues to their school system through the tax that they get is based on enrollments. If they increase the enrollments, and they started using online and other methods to reach out to the rural areas. There was, which was the one that you were just talking to, the Washington, state of Washington is adopting open education in a very large way. And they actually are also, several school systems are going after funding now from Gates and other people to go out after this. Some of them are starting to open up their own education, but more and more what they're doing is they're using the open education that's already available as a resource. For example, one of the examples I'm familiar with is, I don't know if you've ever seen Scratch from MIT. If you haven't, and you have kids who are 9 to 14, 9 to 15 years old, it's a little kind of it's a tool to learn programming. But it's a tool that a 9-year-old could learn programming. And it's a very visual kind of really cool idea. And so MIT's built this, it's free, it's online, my kids have used it, I've taught it in my elementary school as a guest speaker and so forth. What the guys from Scratch have done now is they've actually put curriculum around that, as an introductory CS curriculum around that, intended for middle school, intended for high school. And there are about 2,000 schools now around the world, mostly in the US but also internationally, that offer a CS course in school where the course is that Scratch curriculum. So the class involves watching their lectures online with the teacher there explaining and discussing, and then they do the homeworks and all of that. So a lot of the impact has been that the schools who are willing to adopt these technologies are using the excellent resources out there as a way to bring new ideas into the schools, a way to get the kids more comfortable with them, and the way, frankly, to go beyond the limitations that they have with the teacher training. A lot of teachers don't understand programming or physics or whatever, and could teach it to you. But they can certainly assist with helping you understand a lecture that comes in from outside. So there's those kinds of models as well. There are some schools, and these are even fewer, that are actually setting up online collaboration projects with other schools, so kids can work together with another set of kids in a different school or maybe in a different country on solving an environmental problem and learning biology while you're doing that, or learning about ozone while you're doing that. But those are, I think most of that is still, I would still call it a research project. It's sort of working in a school or two, but it's not mass adoption yet. Just one question on this side. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. My question has, would you think people who learn through this model, open study, that it would be better to have a supplement to your classroom instruction with a teacher, a supplement that helps out? Would you rather suggest that as opposed to being exclusively learning from this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I don't see this as a substitute for a traditional school. I see this as a supplement. But again, if you go back to the numbers, the vast majority of people who cannot get the traditional education that you and I enjoyed in the schools and the universities, some of them, right here in Georgia, if you look at the community colleges in Georgia, right, nationally community colleges educate about 3 million students in the US. The number one problem is they don't have enough teachers qualified to teach the courses. So you have these students who show up to college and they can't take the courses. They're not offered, there are not enough seats. And so what a lot of these people are doing is they're going to things like this as a way to learn something they need to learn but cannot get in their traditional school. So I think it's a supplement in two ways. It's a supplement for people who are in a good traditional school and need some